As I said, it is great to be here with you. We have all changed and how adapted to how we live and work over the past year because of COVID-19. And of course, communications has evolved massively. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about the opportunities that this all presents for us in managing communications for our projects. First of all, we're going to look at the context of where we are now. I will briefly then outline what project communications is to refresh the memories of all of us. And then I'm going to bring you through my 10 lessons from the past year that we can all apply to managing our project communications now and in the future. So first of all, the context. Because of COVID-19, there is now greater interest amongst all age groups in current affairs and in news. So, you know, there is a big change in how and where people go to find news. People have moved back to traditional sources such as RTE and News Talk. They're tuning into the proper news programs, as it were. And so the mainstream media is again seen as the most trustworthy source of information. And you might say, why is that interesting or different? Well, because social media was the preferred source of news for under 35s and even many under 40s over recent years. So seeing people migrate back to watching the news on RTE or listening to News Talk and RTE radio is really, really significant. So since last March, TV advertising has been the highest source of revenue in the past 9 years. And that increased interest in news and current affairs has influenced that increased advertising on TV and radio. Several RTE news programs, for example, featured in the top 10 most watched TV programmes in Ireland last year. And that was along with the All-Ireland Final and the Late Late Toy Show. It's unusual that you would have 4 news programmes in the top 10 most watched. And that signifies how huge news is now. So I have the annual JNLR survey there. It's undertaken every 6 months actually, and then they do a year review. And in October, it showed that far more people are listening to current affairs programmes on our national radio stations. And you can see increases there from 10,000 to 82,000, depending on the different programmes. So news is now a bigger interest to people. We're also more connected now, thanks to broadband and 5G mobile access. This is a great infographic from the CSO. Their annual report in December just gone by highlights how 73% now of all internet users across all age groups are engaging in virtual meetings and chats such as Skype, Zoom, MS Teams. We're all doing it every day. This is particularly notable though, because just a year ago in December 2019, in the CSO report then, only 48% of us were engaging in online video chats. So again, a big, big change. So, you know, other things that have changed is that people now expect more communications from everybody, from their employer, from government, from public authorities, from each other, and of course then from your projects. Another aspect of our changing world is that people are now more interested in their communities than ever before. People are not commuting. They are working from home and they have more time available to spend in their home place and in their community and to get involved. And they are therefore more available to engage in the projects that we're all delivering across the country. So it's important to bear that in mind when you are developing new projects. More people are available to engage, and that's really positive. Before this, people largely resisted in online engagement for projects. They cited everything from lack of internet access to their age and their, not being digital natives and not having knowledge of online tools. But now those barriers are gone. Online shopping and virtual events are the norm. Everything from conferences and seminars like this to the theatre, concerts and social gatherings are now accessible and largely delivered through Zoom and other similar tools. So yes, we know the main benefits of online and virtual events is that larger audiences can be facilitated. There are no barriers to geography or to disability, and literally people can join from across the globe. from a project perspective, for all of you, businesses can continue as normal, albeit we have had to make adjustments, all of us, but business can largely continue as normal. So I believe that the future will be hybrid, that we will still have online events alongside live events to reach that maximum number of people and to ensure that wide spread of interests. In workplaces and in project teams, there is also the enormous focus on internal communications now because of our changing work lives, where we are all largely working from home and working remotely. And that will be expected to continue as well if we look at the context of all of this and where we'll be in the next year and beyond. And, you know, as you can imagine, all of these changes present project managers like yourselves and project developers with immense opportunity. So we are now going to look at 10 lessons that we can bring forward to our project communications as a result of all of this enormous change and opportunity. First of all, though, I am going to remind all of you what is project communications. So project communications involves public consultation, stakeholder engagement, project information, and also issues management for your project. It increases people's understanding really of complex projects and important issues, and therefore it's really, really, really important. It also allows project developers, including you know, public bodies and the government and politicians, to understand how the public is receiving a project, and you know, to advise them on what issues exist for the public and what's important to project stakeholders, and then it provides us with information to help us frame and speak about the project and associated issues. So as I say, it informs all of the decision makers, and it contributes obviously therefore to better decision making. And it gives citizens a voice and shares the ownership really of important, sensitive public decisions, which in turn increases the legitimacy of those public decisions. But project communications is not just about doing the right thing. It is required in government policy and in strategies such as that strategy there for the future development of greenways, and many other government policies that outline and detail requirements for communications and public consultation for major projects. And you're all aware of that because you're delivering projects every day which involve public consultation. We have also got the Aarhus Convention, which was transposed into Irish law in 2012. And that is hugely important because it sets out the requirements for project promoters and developers to be accountable, to provide access to information, access to participation in environmental decision making, and that is all really important. And in fact, the Aarhus Convention is a vehicle that many of you may be aware of is often relied upon by opposition to projects when they want to mount a challenge. So do become familiar with it if you are not already. Something else that is common across all government guidance and international best practice for project communications is that public consultation should be accessible in every sense of the word, and it must be genuine and meaningful. Often, as you know as well, a planning authority will require applicants to submit a statement of community involvement showing how the public and stakeholders have been consulted, and that's often a validation requirement for applications. Many of you will also be familiar with the project communications best practice from your project management body of knowledge 6. So, you know, having strong project communications is vital, and it helps you to develop a very, very strong and robust project application for planning consent, and also to help you to ensure the success of your project. So looking now at the lessons that I would say we should take forward from the past year. The first lesson that I think we should take on board from looking at all that is happening around us is that now we have absolutely no choice but to communicate, no matter what. It is not a choice, it is absolutely a necessity. So if you ever thought that you could take it or leave it for your projects, I hope that the past year has really reminded you that that is no longer the case. It provides enormous opportunities that we should embrace when we think about communications for our projects. People always expected information about your projects. They always expected to be told about what was happening in their area. They also expected and wanted to have a say in what was happening. But now, with so much information being available to people, and that 24/7 news cycle that I mentioned earlier, and all of that social media feeding us new information, news every second is coming at us, and audience therefore have that heightened expectation of how a project should engage with them. So, you know, if you, as I said, if you ever thought communications was something you could ignore, really do think again, because every project that you deliver is for people, and people are benefiting from your projects. People are involved in your projects, and people are impacting them. But people can therefore stop your projects, and there's lots of ways. We've seen many occasions where people have stopped projects, but people can also enhance your projects, and that's what project communications is about. Enabling and encouraging your stakeholders and your publics where you're developing a project to enhance your project. So that's the first lesson. The next lesson that we should take forward with us from the past year is that you should always start with your audience. And what I mean by that is, when you're setting out to engage with stakeholders on your project, you need to reach people where they already are. You know, so ask yourself, what do they already know? What do they need to know? How much do they understand? What are they afraid of? So there's lots of questions there that you should be asking yourself so that you understand their position. And that will inform you then in developing the messaging, so that you're reaching people from the context that they are already in, and developing messaging and an approach to project communications from the audience's perspective. Ultimately, you want to build relationships with your project stakeholders and earn their trust. And in order to do that, you need to understand their fears and concerns and have empathy with your stakeholders. So trust is fundamental to getting your project over the line. I call trust buildability for your project. If you don't have trust, you can have all of the consents in the world, but you don't have buildability. If you've no trust, people will be lying down in front of the bulldozers and blocking you getting through the gateway when you want to go on site. So trust is so important and so valuable. If a community trusts the project team to be straight and honest with them, no matter how unpalatable the project is or how unpalatable the messaging is, you can develop a pathway to deliver the project if you've built up that trust. Trust is also money in the bank for when a project hits a roadblock and you need a community to be patient and to bear with you. So it is one of the most valuable resources that you have for your project, and you develop that trust through good, strong project communications. And of course, it does take time to build that trust, because you need first to build awareness and generate understanding. And listening is a huge part of generating that understanding. And then you ultimately want to secure acceptance for your project. So listen carefully to your stakeholders all along the way, respond to their needs as best you can, and invest in people and relationships and in developing that trust. The next thing I would say to you is, a lesson we've learned from the past year is that those old rules do still apply. You know, Just because we are in this new era of virtual and online engagement doesn't mean that we should forget about all of these basic old rules. And the basic principles of project communication that will always be relevant and that you should always strive to deliver are to be accessible, to be respectful, to be genuine and meaningful, and to be accountable in your project communications. And that will stand regardless of whether you are engaging online or in printed newsletters or at a meeting with stakeholders. And you should always strive to deliver project communications in line with these 4 key principles. Being accessible means ensuring that a project includes language that people understand. It includes being available to people in their local area, being available to people where and when and how it suits them. So that includes virtual, but also live interaction. And it also means that people should be able to access your project and all of the information about your project regardless of their culture or their educational levels or any physical disabilities that they might have. So accessibility in every sense of the word is a basic core principle that is one of the old rules that we should always still adhere to. You should always show respect. We mentioned trust, but you can't garner trust without respect. Your project is likely to impact people in some way, so it is important to acknowledge people that you are going to impact them, and to respect them therefore, and to listen to how that impact is going to affect them or how it scares them maybe. It's really interesting, of course, that we are not entitled to be respected by others. We need to earn that respect. So do think about that always when you pick up the phone or receive an angry bunch of stakeholder submissions or queries. We need to earn their respect, and we do need to listen to them. So if you engage well with your stakeholders though, and do that and acknowledge all of their fears and seek to understand their viewpoints, and endeavour to facilitate their feedback, and you know, there is a lot of things you cannot ever change, but if you acknowledge that and you're straight with your stakeholders, you might just earn their respect and their trust in return. So it is vital and incredibly important for your project. You should also be earnest in everything that you're doing in your project communications. And stakeholder engagement and public consultation is most definitely not a tick box exercise. So please remember that and ensure that you have meaningful public consultation that includes telling your stakeholders at the very start, what are you consulting on? Having strong terms of reference so that their expectations are managed before they engage in the consultation. Being meaningful also includes being accountable so that you're reporting back on all of the feedback that you receive and endeavouring to incorporate it where possible into your project design. Obviously, you're not going to be able to incorporate everything. Maybe sometimes you will not be able to include anything at all, but even a small gesture is useful to help build acceptance of your project. And again, being accountable, you should always tell your stakeholders, report back on your public consultation, tell them what feedback you received and tell them how you're treating the feedback and dealing with it. It is important as well that everything you say is simple and easy to understand. You need to use plain English, and you know, you should be avoiding your jargon and your acronyms. Yes, we'll use acronyms talking to each other now this morning, and in our everyday work with each other, we'll use acronyms, but the public don't understand those acronyms or that in-house jargon that we all use. And also they don't understand all of the technical terminology. So keep it simple, and you know, there is no merit in overcomplicating something or spreading your messages across 3 pages when half a page will actually do. And the past year has really highlighted that we must use simple language and very simple messages to resonate with people. Messages like wash your hands, they are so simple and they resonate with people. So let's take that lesson that, you know, keep it simple, and also there's no time to lose. That's another lesson from the past year. New information is emerging every minute. So if your project team wants to own your project message, then you need to communicate quickly and before anybody else to ensure that the correct project messaging is put on the public record by your project team. And as I said, these principles all hold true whether you're engaging with stakeholders online, in virtual consultation rooms, or in live real life engagement. So the next lesson that we can take from the past year is that virtual and online consultation works, and it is here to stay. So it has been a game changer, absolutely, over the past year for how projects are able to communicate and consult with stakeholders. Up to now, online engagement was only a very small part of project communications. Planning oral hearings were not broadcast. They were only accessible to people who were working, who were not working, or who could take time off to attend live oral hearings. Stakeholders cited barriers to online engagement because of poor or no internet access or age barriers to accessing online consultations. And over half of the submissions that were sent in for public consultations were handwritten and posted in an envelope, because people told us they thought that their submissions would be taken more seriously if they were handwritten and posted than if they were emailed. Open days, as we all know, were usually long days, mostly in the middle of the week, and they ended around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, or sometimes 9 o'clock. But it meant that younger audience were not always able to engage because they were busy with their long commutes and their family commitments. The old format, I suppose, before now, also involved a lot more time. It was time away from the office for all of the project team. And, you know, sometimes we would spend days in empty community halls with a trickle of stakeholders visiting an open day. So that took longer to engage with people over a lot longer period of time, and time away from the office. And it also took longer to process the submissions that were handwritten. So nowadays, so then virtual consultations were practically unheard of, really, up to about a year ago. Whereas now they are providing greater accessibility than ever to our projects. And they have ensured also that the planning process and project development has continued despite the lockdowns and all of the other restrictions on our working lives and on our lives in general. We have across the board in Ireland, every organisation has managed to keep its project developing with hundreds of online and virtual public consultations over the past year. So now the new position that we find ourselves in with virtual consultation, we're able to meet and engage with a wider representation of our communities. So that is a really, really important opportunity of having virtual and online consultations. Everybody is able to access it. And that means that more young people, more young families, more people under 60 really are engaging with us on our public consultations for projects. And that holds true for every different sector, whether it's for energy or transport or water or anything. There is a greater accessibility and a greater engagement by younger audiences because of being virtual and online. Everybody can also now upload their submission online. So that's quick and easy for them, but it also means that it's quicker for us in project communications and for the wider project management team. It's much faster to process submissions that come in by email than having to trawl through handwritten and sometimes difficult to read handwritten submissions. So that speeds everything up and means that the consultation feedback can be available to inform the technical project team much sooner than it might have been in the past when we dealt with handwritten submissions. Previous worries also about the internet access and broadband are gone, so people can watch the live presentation from their mobile phone or attend a virtual or open day any time of the day, any time of the night, any day of the week, including the weekends. And so all of those barriers to access are gone. And they can also submit questions to the project team in a live forum, or they can make an appointment to meet the project team at a time that suits them, rather than being not able to access a live open day in a local hall. And in fact, another great development over the past year is that On Board Planola has even been able to broadcast some of its planning over oral hearings over the internet in recent months. So that also opens up the planning process and makes it more accessible to everybody. And, you know, in RPS, our in-house teams have developed a number of bespoke virtual consultation rooms and portals for at least a dozen projects over the past year. The N52 has just ended, and the consultation report on that is being published soon. And at the moment, if you want to go and try out one of our virtual consultations, the Galway to Athlone Cycleway public consultation is live at the moment. And you may have read about it in the papers last week. There's really, really strong engagement. We're only in the start of the second week now, but there's huge engagement and huge interest, again, across a very wide representation of the community. So the consultation rooms are very, very easy to navigate, and my colleagues who are managing it all day to day on the project teams are reporting really strong engagement. And we've also got some tips to share with you from all of our public consultations that we've been doing in RPS virtually over the past few months. And I suppose really this is all new for everyone, so there's going to be loads of learnings, and I think it would be really, really useful if we all share our learnings across the board from different organisations, so that everybody is able to fine-tune and constantly improve and evolve the offering, because technology is improving and getting better all of the time. So I think that the virtual consultations that we are all running and engaging now will continue to evolve and improve over the coming years as more and more technology advances in this space. So simple things that we would remind you of is ensuring that everything is accessible, not just to a laptop or a desktop, but also to your mobile phones and tablets. And you can see there from the poll that a lot of people are actually joining us this morning on phones. So just think about how you engage yourself and ensure that everything you're doing is accessible that way. You should anticipate issues, of course, and get your key experts to record short videos from their desk. We find this really, really useful. If you get your planners or your archaeologists or different environmental specialists to record a short 3 or 5 minute piece from their desk on Teams or Zoom, then you have that ready to include in discussions with stakeholders over the weeks of your public consultation, rather than constantly having to draw on the different experts to join live meetings. So that's a really useful tip. Again, remember this is a new experience for everybody, and that many stakeholders aren't completely fluent or comfortable with online and virtual activity. We're all doing it every day for work, but many people are not. So do provide directional signage and make it easy for them to navigate the room. It should be instant as well. That's a really important aspect of keeping it simple and accessible. All of our consultations, you click on a panel display once and the information pops up. People don't have to click multiple times to dig into something that will take them all around the internet to find a document and open the page. So make it accessible, make it instant, one click ideally, arrows around the room, and also make sure that it's not cluttered. And I'd also say to you, don't only rely on the written word. We're including videos and audio as well. And that's really important, not just for accessibility, but it also gives you huge opportunity to present your information in a more interactive manner. And videos can be made on your phone. They do not have to cost the earth. So, you know, that's the other great thing about now. People want more information faster, and they're not critiquing the quality as much as they might have been before, where they expected everything in high definition. So, you know, quick and instant and simple is effective. And also we find it really useful to include a booking system, a booking form that people can just click on their virtual consultation room so that they can book a meeting with us. So there are tips and learnings from virtual consultations. But we still have 5 more tips to go. And that's because, you know, we don't believe that the future is going to be all virtual. We believe that it is going to be both hybrid and integrated. So what we mean by that is that, you know, yes, we have moved forward by probably about 10 years in the past 10 months in terms of everyone living their life virtually, shopping and socializing and working in a virtual world. But we are all probably, most of us anyway, are itching to get back to a new normality where we can engage in real life again and meet with people and just have that real life interaction. So the future of project communications, therefore, will not all be virtual. It will be a hybrid approach. And that goes for every event really in the future. You know, events like this, I'm sure if we were doing this in a year's time, I'd probably be in Clyde Road with maybe 100 of you, and there might be another 70 people at home in Sligo and Kilkenny and Cork and Carlow and all over the country. So the future is hybrid. We will embrace the online and the virtual aspects to engage with a larger audience and a wider audience too, that is more representative of our populations. And we will also run live events parallel to the virtual and the online event. And really, that's because we are adapting to a crisis right now, and that's why we have gone online, and we're making things work. You know, we are resilient, as we keep being told, and we are keeping our projects moving forward. And that has taken very, very quick and pretty smooth adaptation by everyone in Ireland. But we do need to reach our audiences in the future, wherever they are. Right now, everyone is online, so we can reach them there. But in the future, they won't all be online. Some people will not even want to be online. And so campaigns and projects will need to take that integrated approach to reach everybody. Some people engage in local newspapers or local radio, others engage in social media. Some want to attend the live open day in a community hall. They want to study the map with an engineer or an environmental specialist and be guided through it by them. Others will prefer to attend in their own time, at whenever it suits them, on their mobile phone. And you know, another aspect of it all, while we talk about our video calls and our Teams and Zoom meetings with stakeholders, we can't either estimate the importance and the longevity of the old telephone. There are many, many people who still now and in the future will always want to engage on the telephone. Sometimes it's because of their age, they feel more comfortable with that medium, but oftentimes too, we talk to stakeholders who want to use the telephone because they're fluent in English, but they're not necessarily comfortable with reading material about a technical project in English, and they would prefer to talk to a real person who can explain it to them in a manner that they're able to access. So, you know, that aspect of being hybrid and being integrated includes things like telephones, as well as telephone lines for your projects, as well as live events and meetings, alongside all of the new activities we're doing as well. And of course, all of the old materials like printed newsletters and posters will always be relevant. We have used them even more than ever, actually, in the past year to promote projects, because there isn't that word of mouth aspect that you would have normally had in a community to promote a project. And so while we will have always placed ads in newspapers and put up posters, we have been doing a lot more door-to-door deliveries of leaflets and newsletters over the past 10 months. And people really, really appreciate that because they don't want to go out and engage in their community. And so the information has to come to them and again, reach them where they are, in their house, at home and online. So You will also keep on producing more and better technology contributions to your projects through technology, including videos and podcasts. More and more and more people are listening to podcasts while they engage in other activities than even will sit down and watch a video. So do think about podcasts more and more for your projects, the audio aspect, and also BIM. We have amazing BIM in RPS, and it is producing fantastic virtual run-throughs of projects so that people can experience what a project will be like, and that needs to be continued and embraced even more so that people get to experience their projects. We keep hearing about people wanting more experiences, and that is certainly a way that we're doing it for projects. The next opportunity and lesson, I suppose, that we take forward from the past year is that honest, regular and factual communications is essential when you are managing a crisis. And I think that is something that we are all seeing and hearing every single day in our own lives. Having a crisis management plan is also really, really important, therefore, because being prepared for a crisis is like insurance. You hope you'll never need to use it, to draw on it, but you are more secure if you know you have prepared. So having including all of your communications risks in your project risk management plan is essential, and obviously you would include mitigating measures as well. You should also look at every existing risk on your project, all of the technical risks, and examine those for potential communications fallout or impacts, and again track them constantly and regularly review them. You should also have a very effective crisis communications plan so that while one team is focused on fixing the actual problem that's at hand, and that could be a construction site accident or it could be a court injunction, but whatever your crisis is, you need one team fixing that crisis and then another team managing communications for that issue, so that it is managed in the public domain and that the technical team fixing the problem is not distracted. So all of the protocols for managing your crisis communications should be set out clearly in your crisis communications plan. Now, when I talk about crisis communications plan, I can already feel some of you groaning and thinking, oh my God, a big, huge document that costs us loads of money and that will sit on a top shelf gathering dust. And when the crisis hits, we won't know where it is. That is not a crisis plan. A crisis plan is 1 or 2 pages. It should include important, vital information like contact names and numbers for key personnel, instructions on who should be contacting whom, key external stakeholders, it could be the Gardaí, the HSE and others, and also clear protocols for who's going to be in charge of what, who's going to manage the incoming phone calls to the customer call line or to the project information line, who's going to talk to the media, who's going to deal with the local elected representatives. The government has demonstrated this really, really effectively. It is basic crisis communications good practice to have 2 teams, one managing the communications, one managing the crisis, and also to be prepared and ready to deal with a crisis and to communicate it effectively when it happens. So the government has done that. NPHET has established, they're communicating to us every single day. But there is another team there in the background rolling out the vaccines, managing the hospitals. The main people we see every night on TV from NPHET, yes, they are advising the approach, but they are not the only people there. There's a large team of people focused on the management of the issue, and the other team is involved, obviously, but their main remit is to communicate. And finally, when you're not busy, that's the time when you should take your fire drill approach and prepare for your emergency situation or your crisis. You can simulate a crisis situation, and that includes preparing your spokespeople, preparing your messaging, behaving as if you were in a real life crisis so that you have rehearsed it almost. And when a real life issue does arise that you have to go into crisis mode, at least you will feel, well, we've gone through this somewhat already. So another related aspect to your crisis is that, you know, the public trusts experts. And again, we're seeing that more and more and more. It's a huge learning from the past year that people do really, really trust experts. And we all know the old adage that a reputation takes years to earn and a social media second to lose. So bear that in mind. And think about it when you do have an issue at the outset, when you're managing communications for your project. You need to position yourself as the reliable source of information, the only source of information. And then when a sensitive situation arises and needs to be communicated, that's when you really need to have very reliable and very credible experts on your team to defend the project. It could be an external expert on noise or on odors. Maybe it's somebody already on your team. Maybe it's an academic with a very strong reputation. Maybe it's an international expert from an organization such as the World Health Organization. It will depend on the crisis. It will depend on the project. But you know, there are, of course, many different experts out there. And of course, they do not all share the same opinion as your project team will have. So that's where your opponents of the project will be able to stack up other experts with different and diverging viewpoints. And they will always be citing expert findings according to Google and Wikipedia. So you must be certain that your experts are solid and beyond reproach. Your experts should always be factual, and they shouldn't be, you know, engaging in conjecture. They need to be solid and reliable. Also, as well as being brilliant experts, they also must be able to communicate in a manner that people can understand and relate to. So they should undergo some media preparation in advance. And I would say another learning from the past year really is that people are very forgiving if you are honest and if you're straight with them, and if you don't overpromise, they will be forgiving. So do bear that in mind always. And that is also part of gaining and retaining their trust and their respect. And finally, I would say to you, you know, if you do make a mistake or if you cause a problem, admit it, say sorry and mean it. And that's something that we can see happening all of the time over the past year. You know, people can't always get it right. So if you're upfront about it and if you're genuine and sincere, people are forgiving and they will let you move forward. We're nearly coming towards our last few lessons learned. A huge one is internal communications. Over the past year, when all of us moved to work from home, and we had never done so before, this became a huge focus, internal engagement. And if you didn't have internal communications before last March, I'm sure you all do now. It is a huge change. Before now, internal communications was terribly glamorous. It focused on a lot of fun and a lot of expensive trips. We heard of Google often flying their staff out of Dublin over to glamorous places like Las Vegas for conferences. But nowadays, internal communications is much more practical and much more real. People are disconnected from their colleagues, from their office culture. So internal communications has become relevant and essential across every organization. The gimmicks are gone, and it's now a practical, no frills approach to inform and reassure staff. So going forward as a project manager, you will be expected to continue to provide lots of information and to listen to your staff and your project teams. And also, you know, to have a very structured sense of internal communications within your project team. It's an enormously important aspect of managing an efficient project team, is to have that strong protocol in place. And there are lots of new emerging technologies that are there to support you in doing that. You know, you can have chatbots to organize team meetings, to schedule team meetings, and you can have lots of other technology there to prompt people, for example, to update the stakeholder database and to update their inputs to reports. So all of that project team communications is growing and becoming more and more important. It's also important to recognise staff for their achievements. Often the project teams will engage in local events in their project area. It could be a charity event or something. This should be acknowledged and shared with your team and organisation. It's something we've seen a lot of in the past year, where workers are highlighted on social media and in mainstream media for doing good. And that is a really important part of building culture on your team and in your organisation. Another area to watch for over the coming years is employee activism. And if you don't listen to your employees, and if you don't know what's bubbling on your project team, you might just end up having to address an issue that has actually become a crisis and has externalized. And you know, things like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, and also people calling out their organizations for non-compliance with the government guidelines over the past year, they're all employee activism. And there's a lot of research to say that over the next 2 years, a third of all budgets on crisis communications will actually be invested on internal crisis communications, most notably employee activism. So listening and engaging with your teams is really, really, really going to become more and more important. The other thing that I would always say to you, and it's become more noticeable recently, is that, you know, you do need to have your project communications professionals on board. The government over the past year and the Department of Health and the HSE have increased their communications staff massively. It is one of the only non-clinical areas that they have been increasing staff, because they need to communicate more and more and more. So while we see the really strong NEFIT spokespeople every night on TV, there is a massive team of people like me behind them, supporting them in what they're doing. So your project communications professionals are essential for your projects. You know, you've lots of other technical disciplines, whether it's health and safety professionals or others, they're supporting your team. And you should also enlist experts in project communications to deliver that specialist area of work to ensure that your project is robust. And, you know, it is important that the project communications experts are there to help you with developing your messaging and also to deliver your messaging. But also we will help you to, you know, evaluate your communication strategy and plan so that it is all the time responsive and evolving and relevant, because it isn't a project communication strategy, and a project communications plan is most definitely not linear or static. It needs to be reviewed and it needs to evolve and respond to how people are receiving your project and how they're receiving the information. So my last lesson is the importance of being inclusive. And I'm conscious that we have only 5 minutes to go. So Anne might have a few questions for me at the end, but I am literally on my last slide. So we can get to questions very quickly. But the government's approach to communications really did seek to embrace and reach everybody. Think about the sign language interpreters that you're seeing on the TV news every night. That reminds us that we must acknowledge that everybody is part of the problem and everyone has a role to play in the solution. So with your projects, all of your project stakeholders have a role to play, and you need to include all of them. So there's really good information available on the National Disability Authority NDA.ie website, and it's a really good place to start to check if your project is inclusive. And it includes everything from how your website is set up. It includes information about plain English to make sure that you can reach people in a manner that they understand, so that there are no barriers to disability or education. Also, just as you would ensure to communicate in Irish if you were in a project, developing a project in a Gaeltacht area, we need to remember that over 500,000 people here now in Ireland are non-Irish nationals, and they speak Polish, Chinese, Urdu, Portuguese, and dozens of other languages. Some never engage in Irish media at all. They never engage in social media from Ireland, and some of them don't read in English. So you do need to include them. They are part of your project audience, and you need to find ways to reach and engage with them. And also be cognizant of how other cultures might misinterpret or negatively react to project materials and project information when you're developing things like your photographs and your videos. So those are my 10 lessons and opportunities really that we can all take with us from the past year. And I would encourage you to embrace them and to share them with your project teams so that you can apply them to the projects and build important trust amongst your stakeholders and ensure that you are always accessible in your project communications over the coming year and beyond. As I said, I promised Anne we'd finish on time. So I'm going to hand over to Anne to see if there are any questions. So Anne, I'll go back to you.
Okay, thank you, Neasa. We've a number of questions in. I'll just go through maybe a couple of them. One from Dara Rogan. Do you find that with new digital, more interactive methods of communications with stakeholders that you need to tweak your message or method of engagement compared to less involved stakeholders?
So definitely you should, as I said at the outset, start from where your audience is. And, you know, because you are bringing in a wider swathe of a wider representation of your community. And as I said earlier, all of our audiences are very intelligent. They are highly educated. We are all of us here this morning are also citizens and residents. So we can all engage, and we do engage in projects in our areas. So remember that, and remember that, yes, you should be tweaking your messaging. It should be bespoke. There is not a one size fits all approach to anything, whether it's your project communications strategy or your plan or your brochures or your materials. You cannot take something that you've used with another stakeholder or on another project and replicate it and try to make it fit for individual stakeholders or different projects.
Thank you, Neasa. One more question in there from Paul Boylan. He assumes that virtual awareness communication strategies are largely, excuse me, confined to public consultation. Has Neasa found that RPS has needed to engage in a similar way for any private developments?
Yes, we are working on a number of projects in the renewable energy space, and they now more and more, you're right, the public sector has to date been the main driver of strong, credible, robust public consultation and project communications. And you can see that in the, you know, the commitment in public organisations like Irish Water to having project communications experts and teams who are engaging on project communications on a daily basis. But now we also see the private sector, most notably, as I say, in that renewable energy space, building in-house teams of project communication specialists and also engaging in very, very strong community outreach, employing community liaison officers, and really, really committing to strong public consultation and strong public consultation and stakeholder engagement to inform their projects and to inform the design of their projects, even the location of their projects. They are consulting on all of that very actively. Literally at the moment, a number of them are as well. So definitely a great change. And it's the way it should be, that people want to contribute to a project. It impacts them, whether it's public sector or private sector. People don't care. It is ultimately for people, but it is going to impact them, either during development or during development and in operation as well.
Okay, I think we'll have to leave it at that. We do just have one other question in relation to the video be available, and yes, it will be available later for people to view. So I think I'd just like to really close the presentation at that. I'd like to thank you all for attending. We had unprecedented numbers we'd over 170 online this morning from all parts of the country. So I'm very, very pleased to see that, and thank you all very much for your engagement. I'd like to thank Neasa for providing a very informative presentation on project communications, and indeed in sharing RPS's tips and learnings from virtual consultations, which I'm sure we'll all find very beneficial.